Have you ever wondered who invented the tin can? No? We'll get right then, because this is one wild tale. Our story begins in 1795 France. Recently, the French people decided that they were tired of having a monarch. So they did what any reasonable people would: beheaded all their monarchs and put their heads on pikes, parading them around the town for everyone to see. Now, unfortunately for France, the countries around it were all monarchs, so they were kind of intimidated by the whole heads on pikes thing. And they made it clear that they were going to put a king back on the French throne. Well, now France was fighting a war on multiple sides, so they needed the best generals around. In walks Napoleon Bonaparte. Trust me, this is all still leading back to cans. Napoleon was an excellent general and won France a whole lot of fights. But there's one thing you have to remember about fighting in the 1800s. It was mostly about protecting your supply line. Whoever had the bigger supply line and the most resources would be able to feed their troops for longer and outlast the other army, winning the war. Unfortunately for Napoleon, he was fighting a war far off in the middle of the European countryside, where people weren't exactly willing to give the invading army a bunch of food. So Napoleon needed a new way to preserve food over a long amount of time. If only there was a simple invention that could keep food preserved for a very long time. So Napoleon complained to the French government, and they put a 12,000 franc reward for anyone who could create a device capable of preserving food over a long amount of time. Now, this reward sat vacant for many a years until in walks the father of cannon, the preserver of pickles, the dork with the corks, the container of carrots, Nicholas Appert. He saw the 12,000 franc reward and immediately got up, beginning what would be nearly a 15-year expedition to find and invent a way to preserve food over a long time and claim the cash prize. His skills as a candyman gave him the knowledge that when you put something in a jar, it stays preserved for longer. However, this technology was just not enough for Mr. Appert, and he went off finding a better way to close a jar. He experimented with dozens of sealants, over hundreds of experiments, until he came to his grande idea. He knew from his experience working with wine that when air is exposed to something, it starts to spoil. So he realized that what he needed to do to preserve food over a long amount of time was find a way to seal it closed and get all of the air out of it. So he took his glass jars, filled them with food, and put a cork on them. However, here's where the real crazy part comes in. He took the jar and put it in boiling water in order to get all of the air out of it. Now, without any oxygen, the bacteria inside the can would suffocate and die. Nicholas Appert had created the first can. Nicholas then sent off his design to the French government, where testing began. Success! His cans managed to preserve food across the 4-month voyage in the ocean. And when he got back, he claimed the 12,000 franc reward and solidified himself as the inventor of the first can. But wait right now, if I Google who invented the tin can, this Peter Durand guy shows up. What gives? This is where the villain of our tale shows up. Peter Durand, only a year after Nicholas Appert invented the can, this schnieveling British inventor came along and swiped the patent out straight from under poor Appert's nose. If you remember, France and Britain are technically at war right now, so it'd be pretty hard for Frenchman Appert to get a British patent, which also, unfortunately, is what would go on to be the standard for figuring out who invented what. Unfortunately, however, Peter Durand is British. He swiped the patent out from Nicholas Appert's nose by replicating his invention nearly identically, just swapping out the glass jar and cork for tin. This story does not have a happy ending. Peter Durand gets away with swiping Nicholas Appert's invention and forever is immortalized by Google as the inventor of the can. Not the person who actually made it, but just the copy. What have we learned today? Don't trust everything you see when it's the first link. Oftentimes, the first thing to show up is not usually the most correct answer, but the most popular answer. And in this case, the most British answer. So whenever you're looking for information, make sure you do more research than just looking at the headline and calling it a day. That doesn't tell you anything besides what other people want you to know. So even if it's something as simple as a can, make sure you do the proper research, or else you might be stuck with a British invented can.